Welcome back to Your Real Estate Voice with Barb Schlinker, the weekly radio show that informs and educates you on how to buy or sell real estate with Barb Schlinker, the owner broker of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty and the host of this program. Now, Barb, most home sellers believe that they should leave for the showings. What are the top agent mistakes that agents do to home sellers, and how should they avoid having them happen?
Well, Richard, the one thing that I find very odd about the real estate industry, especially coming from a background and being in the military, I got to be an air traffic controller, I was an intel officer, I was a pilot. All those jobs had procedures, checklists, what you said, what you did. Not so much in real estate. It's really a low barrier to entry. It's 1 month of school, and they pretty much they tell you go hang your license with a broker and go sell, figure it out. And you can ask questions, but even then, my experience was my colleagues didn't want to share with me because I was their competition. So it's very strange. So there's no job description for what an agent representing a buyer should do, or an agent representing a seller should do. People just kind of copy each other and sort of figure it out. People naturally gravitate towards the easy button. At least that's been my experience over time. As an example, I had a house that was held open recently, and the buyer came to the open house. Basically had me sell the house for the buyer's agent. The buyer's agent never has yet to see the house, but the buyer's agent wrote the contract. So how would that bother you, Richard? You know, that the agent representing the buyer never even saw the house?
That is a pretty big misunderstanding, misstep, call it whatever you want. That's not good.
Yeah, so they do that. Or if they do show up and show the home, the other side of this is sometimes they'll point out flaws and defects of the home, or inappropriately talk them out of it. You know, you have to expect this day and age, when you go in somebody's house, you could be on camera, right? But a lot of them don't think about it. So they'll go in the house and they'll just talk away and they'll tell them their strategy, about, oh, well, I think, it's just priced high, or I think, maybe this other home is a better deal. And it's like, why are you there? If you're there and you're talking this buyer out of getting the house, what if they love the house? That's a huge mistake, because they're never going to forget how much they love that house. And you were the agent that talked them out of it. So I see that all the time. And my clients catch it on camera and they don't understand what's going on. Why is this agent standing out here telling the buyer that it won't qualify for these loans? Even if the home has a few condition issues that may not pass a VA appraisal, they can all be fixed. So it's astounding to me how bad the selling skills are out there. Now, here's a problem. Sellers want the sale to go through. So once it goes under contract, in the seller's mind, it's a done deal. We just have to get to closing, right? But the buyer has a half a dozen different reasons that they could bail out of the contract and get their earnest money back. No harm, no foul. They will have to pay for an inspection, because that's a buyer cost. They will have to pay for an appraisal if it gets that far, because that's a buyer's cost. But the sellers don't have any way to get out of the contract. They just have to wait out the process and hope and pray the buyer comes through. And in the meantime, the world is seeing that the home is under contract. So if for some reason the buyer changes their mind and the house goes back on the market, the automatic default of what other agents think is there's something wrong with the house and not necessarily the buyer. I've seen deals fall apart that had nothing to do with the house. It fell apart because the lender didn't appropriately pre-qualify the buyer and they couldn't afford the home. It's only 2 weeks of school to become a mortgage broker. So there's not a high bar to get these things done. And people assume that these are highly trained people, and it's not always the case. So you just have to know how to prepare for it and make sure you hire the right person that's leaning forward and trying to pay attention to what's going on. I'll give you another example. I had one property that got 4 offers on it. And so we went through and called every single lender of every single buyer that made an offer and asked them my series of questions that I have to confirm that they actually are fully qualified. Because you can get a pre-qualification lender that only means that that mortgage broker spoke on the phone with that buyer for a few minutes and the buyer said, oh, I make this much. Then they write a pre-approval letter without verifying anything. So I got one of those lenders on the phone and I said, so have you verified their income or their assets? Has it been approved through underwriting? Have you done any of those things? And the answer was, oh, well, we're halfway there. And I'm like, really? You want to tie up my seller's property up against competition and you haven't done your homework yet. You don't even know if this buyer qualifies. So you have to make sure that before it goes under contract, that your agent is doing some due diligence. So I just wrote out kind of this little graph of what I think the duties should be for a listing agent versus a buyer's agent through the course of a transaction. So a listing agent should negotiate the offer. Then once it goes under contract, they have steps to do. They coordinate title, inspection, appraisal. If there are repairs, we have to work with the seller, figure out how they want to respond to that. Same with appraisal. Schedule the closing, notify the seller and schedule the final walkthrough. And of course, sit down with the seller and make sure the final settlement is correct. The buyer's agent needs to deliver the offer, schedule the inspection, send the contract to the lender, order the appraisal. They might make repair requests. They might have issues with the appraisal if it does not come in at least at contract price. Schedule the buyer's closing and schedule the final walkthrough and then go to the closing, hopefully. Here's the problem. They don't necessarily plan ahead, right? So I didn't get any formal training on how to do duties on either side. I've done both, but I never got formal training on how to do it or what sequence to do it or some of the things I need to watch out for. It's all been experiential training for me and sometimes learning the hard way. So we're going to talk a little bit about what has changed and how you can set yourself up for success so there are no last minute surprises. My name is Barb Schlinker. I'm the broker owner of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty and the host of this show, Your Real Estate Voice. And what we're talking about are some of the things that agents do, especially once the buyer goes under contract. And we'll be discussing what you can do to protect yourself from the agent not really planning ahead or doing some things that you don't expect. If you are thinking of making a move, give us a call. We know how to protect. We have systems and processes in place to protect sellers from any of those surprises so they know what's happening next every single step of the way. Give us a call at 719-301-3900 or go to barbhasthebuyers.com. Richard?
You're listening to Your Real Estate Voice with Barb Schlinker of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. You can always reach her at 719-301-3900. And we're talking, Barb, about moving. So what are some other agent mistakes that can happen to sellers and what should they do about them?
Well, just as an example, little things like ordering an inspection. So the typical process when a home goes under contract is that the listing agent or their team is going to order title, and that will get the research done on getting prepared for closing, get the title company involved, right? And what the buyer's agent is supposed to be doing is scheduling the inspection. But I don't know what's been going on lately, Richard. It's just weird to me that a lot of the communications I have with the buyer's agent, especially on the other side of the transaction, do not happen during business hours. They happen after 5:30. Just last night, I had 2 real estate emergencies of people trying to schedule late inspections after 8 p.m. on a Sunday night. And how would you feel about that?
I would be a little bit angry that people couldn't just figure out that Sunday night on a weekend is probably not the best time to be calling people.
Well, my phone's going to the off button real quick. And you know what? I'm not going to be their real estate emergency. And I have systems in place. I'd already sent these notices out to say you need to schedule well in advance. Don't wait until the night before and just expect that you're going to get approval to do that. Plus, both deals, it was two different agents that did it. Both deals have been under contract for more than a week. It's like, where you been? You know that's the next step. I can't tell you to do your job, and I'm certainly not going to ask you to do an inspection because I work for the seller. But it doesn't make any sense to me that everything is at the last minute. It's the same thing for the final walkthrough. In the contract, it's in our state contracts that the buyers are entitled to a final walkthrough prior to closing. It could be on closing day, it could be a day before closing day, it could be 2 days before closing day. Whenever the buyer wants to do it, they're supposed to schedule with reason in advance. It even says it within reason in the contract, but they don't. They wait until the moment they're going to do it or the night before. It's always a real estate emergency. And I'm like, what are you doing with your time? Or my favorite part is one of the things that they do pretty often right now is they abdicate the whole process to what they call a TC. That's an acronym for transaction coordinator. So what is a transaction coordinator? Well, I don't know. There's no definition. There's no job description for it. There certainly isn't anything in the license law about it. But it's sort of like the agents created this new industry of admin assistants essentially to coordinate what they have to do from the time it goes under contract to closing. So in other words, I guess the theory is they're salespeople, their job is to sell. So then they'll hand off all the administrative duties to some admin person. But that admin person is supposed to track critical deadlines that could mean that the home falls out of contract. So think about this. If you're a home seller and your home is under contract, but oh, whoops, you got another buyer that wants the house, but they were late to the party, you could accept a backup offer. So if buyer number one messes up on any contract date, right, buyer number two could get the house. So here are these agents that are paid thousands of dollars to sell homes abdicate this very important responsibility to somebody that doesn't have any fiduciary duty to their client at all. They're just paid a couple $100 to track deadlines and chase things down, which they don't do very well. And they do it at 8 o'clock at night and make it my real estate emergency right before it's due. And it drives me crazy. And so I've kind of had to create documentation that I share with the agents to let them know how it works with Barb. Because if the state's not going to regulate it, fine. I'm going to regulate it to make sure that there are no surprises because I want the process for the seller to be consistent and on time and correct and without surprises. If you are thinking of making a move, you want somebody that has your back. So give us a call at 719-301-3900 or go to barbhasthebuyers.com. Richard?
You're listening to Your Real Estate Voice with Barb Schlinker of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. And if you are thinking of making a move, call Barb at 719-301-3900 or visit barbhasthebuyers.com. We'll take a short break. When we come back, the discussion will be how to get multiple offers on your home, even in this market. Stay tuned for that.